I hope I won't be accused of blowing my trumpet, but with all sense of modesty and responsibility, I'll say that it's been a success. Now, let me take us back a bit. When I assumed in October, preparations for 2024 Hajj had commenced. You would recall that sometime in August, September, there was an announcement of a Hajj fair, which was meant to be a deposit of about 4.5, 4.9. Now, the tradition has always been Hajj has received special attention from government when it comes to an exchange rate. There have been concessionary rates in the past that have been given to pilgrims. And I know that that wasn't restricted probably to the Muslim pilgrims. But then, because of changes in policy, both monetary and fiscal, 2024 became special. You would recall that government in its wisdom came up with a policy that allowed the naira to float. So it became near impossible for any window of concession to be granted. Pilgrims started the deposits, but it was rather coming slowly. Now the pattern has always been, whatever the pilgrims come to deposit in the states, with the state's pilgrims welfare boards, such amounts are remitted to the NACON account in CBN. These accounts is normally controlled by NACON, but the monies in there are harvested on behalf of the pilgrims and on behalf of the states. These are the same monies that are used to buy the services. When I say buying the services, of course, you talk about the accommodation, the feeding, and the transportation in Saudi Arabia. These are the funds that you use to pay the providers. Let me make an explanation, and advisedly, probably it would answer maybe any forthcoming question that you will ask. That has become necessary because the Saudi policy recognizes only NACON as an entity, just like it recognizes NACON sister agencies all over the world. In other words, it doesn't deal with fragmented entities. It deals with one entity. Fast forward. So when we harvest these monies that are sent by the states, we then pay the providers that, one, for example, arrangements in Makkah, both the accommodation and the feeding, are normally the prerogative of the states. They choose those to provide services to them. What we do is we make sure that they tick all the boxes in terms of comfort, in terms of how conducive both the accommodation and the feeding will be, and we tick on that. But then you recall that getting the deposit into the NACON's account in CBN became an issue. Initially, there was the hope there was going to be concession, which was a tradition. It never occurred. So we were foot dragging. At a point, we were almost giving up that probably 2024 Hajj was going to be a mirage. Now, consultations went on, but at a point, we had to now approach the federal government and indeed the states to say that the way things are going, unless we get a concessionary rate to cushion the effect of whatever the pilgrims are expected to pay, there's going to be a problem. And of course, Nigerians would recall that it was at that point that the president magnanimously granted 90 billion naira to subsidize whatever that was going to be paid. Now let me define that too. People will ask why 90 billion if there was no concession. It might interest Nigerians to know that whenever you talk about Hajj fare, you are talking about dollar-denominated service. It's paid in dollars. So whatever computation you make is based on what your naira can purchase to the level of the dollar that you would want. Now, initially, when we came up with the calculations, realizing that 4.5, 4.9 wasn't going to fly, we said, okay, if you try to convert 5,692 or thereabout to a naira at an exchange rate for that day, which was going to 1,500 to a dollar, you're talking about over 8 million, 8.5 million. How do you get 8.5 million when it was even difficult to get 4.5, 4.9? Now, we thought of so many things. What do you do? If you recall, at a point, we just had to bite the bullet. We came up with the pronouncement that, look, reality has set in. Hajj fare is over 8 million. It's close to 9 million. And there's a problem. People that are struggling to pay 4.5, 4.9, how did they pay 9? So when the concession wasn't coming in, that was when the president gave 90 billion. Now with the president's 90 billion, at a point in time, we had barely 18,000 pilgrims that could have been taken care of with the 90 billion. Assuming that you've translated and changed the 5,692 into naira with an exchange rate of about 1.5, okay, if you spread the 90 billion, it could cover 18,000 or thereabout. But there you are. By the figures, at that time you already had close to 50,000 pilgrims that had registered. Who do you sideline? Who do you excise from the well-intentioned activities that were going on? So, after due consultation, I know whatever we did with the 90 billion, government was aware. We got all stakeholders to be aware of what was happening. It was then agreed that, look, why don't you spread the 90 billion across the close to 50,000 so that everybody will have a feel of the magnanimity. It was then the calculation came up that, look, if you're spreading it of the 90 billion to these individuals, then everybody will get 1,630,000 something. But there's still a gap for you to get to that threshold I told you, which invariably means that there's still a shortfall of 1.918 million or thereabout. I'm sure you will recall, and Nigerians will too, that it was at that stage that some of the subnationals really stood up to come and assist. Some governors gave in their own contribution in mitigating the hardship. Some gave 1 million and said, look, okay, you pilgrims, go and look for 918. Some gave 1.5 million. Some gave the 918 million, and so on and so forth. But Allah has always been kind, and if He has called you, you are destined to go. There will always be a way. Quite a good number of those that had paid the 4.5, 0.9 rose to the occasion. They were able to get the 1.9 million because of the time gap that we got. Most of them that were peasants were able to sell their farm produce. Some sell their animals because they were lucky that the period was apt for them to do that, since there was an extension per se, and they did. And there we were. Now, that is for the fare. Then came the issue of the visa. because we realized that there were two major factors that either caused delay or mar the entire Hajj arrangement when you consider the processes. One is the visa issuance. You discover that there is delay in issuance of visa, and unfortunately these visas are not maybe a one-off thing that you stay within the comfort of your office. You just take a stamp on people's passport and say, okay, you've gotten the visa, go. There are some conditions precedents before you're issued a visa. Part of it is you have to show that you have paid for the pilgrim on a certain portal. You've secured accommodation for him. You've secured somebody that will feed him. You've secured his transportation. All these components will now give the green light that, well, okay, yes, Victor is good to go, or Renee is good to go. Yes, issue her visa or issue him visa. Unless you do that, no visa for you. So in the past, there were these challenges that visas are delayed, you don't get them on time. Sometimes you go begging for an extension to do that. When I say, okay, why don't we address that so that we can have some concentration on the other sectors? So we did, and God helping us, we were able to succeed on that. We'll make sure that we address the issue of the visa on time, make sure that we shut that door so that we concentrate on the other factor that mitigates this. The second factor is the air flight. You discover that pilgrims will be ready, the visas will be there, but there are no aircraft. They don't come. Some would say that they have the facility, they have the capacity to do it, and then you come and the jets are not there. So, but this time around we say no, we did. So having concluded on the visa issue, we now concentrated on the air freight. And that one too, God helped us. For the first time in so many years, we didn't have to ask the authority to beg the Saudis to extend the opening of the airspace for us, or to say that please we want to land but we want more time to do that. No. 3 days before they closed their airspace, we had carried all our pilgrims to Saudi Arabia, and everybody had his own visa.